Yeah, what we want to talk about is why use epoxy flooring, instead of tiles in building construction. Because oftentimes you see here and there everybody talking about epoxy flooring. So what is this epoxy flooring? The importance of epoxy flooring in building construction. So what is this epoxy flooring that um most companies, most contractors, most engineering firms tend to use in building construction? That is for the flooring and finishes. So why do they use epoxy flooring? So we'll take a look at the reasons of epoxy flooring as compared to your tiles, right? So epoxy flooring is a seamless, durable flooring system made from epoxy resins and hardeners. So it is actually made from epoxy resins, then and hardeners. So hardeners are additives that is admixtures that were added to the resins, which actually gives it that strength. So it creates a strong chemical resistance and easy to clean surface. So when you make utilization of epoxy flooring, so it actually helps to create a strong, you understand, then chemical resistant and easy to clean surface. I think that easy to clean surface actually makes it more interesting, because one of the challenges people face at home is this cleaning of a thing. So but when you have an epoxy flooring in your house, it makes it so easy to clean, because the surface becomes so smooth and easy to clean, then making it ideal for high performance areas in residential, commercial and industrial buildings. So when you make use of your epoxy flooring, so it actually gives that high performance as compared to your normal tiles and other flooring material, either wood or, but epoxy flooring actually gives a high performance, and it's majorly used in your residential, commercial and industrial buildings. So take a look at the reasons why we make use of epoxy flooring. Okay, the first reason here is high durability and strength. So because I think one of the things to consider in your flooring is this durability and strength, right? Because epoxy flooring is extremely strong and resistant to heavy loads, impacts, abrasion and wearing, right? Then outlasting tiles and grouts. Yeah, because one of the main disadvantage of tiling is this grouting, because when you join your two tiles together, you're going to have your grout, right? And sometimes you do grout filling, but sometimes the grouts are not properly filled, and you still tend to have seepage of water flowing underneath the tile, causing the tile to maybe in the long run swell up to a reasonable amount of damage that you still need to do renovation, and you're resulting to your tile remover, right? But for your epoxy flooring, there is no grouting, right? It's just you pour the epoxy mix the epoxy resin, you just pour it on the floor and you spread it to the corners of the wall, and that is it. So there is no grouting, there is no defect from water, because it is water resistant itself, right? So high durability and strength is one of the reason why epoxy flooring is used. So the second reason is chemical and stain resistance. So epoxy flooring tends to actually resist stain and chemicals, unlike your tiles. Maybe your oily substance poured on the surface of your tile. If your tile is white, you have to start cleaning, scrubbing, needing maybe other chemicals to clean the surface of your tile. But for your epoxy flooring, it actually helps to resist chemicals and stain. Then it resists chemicals such as oil, grease, acids, and stains, making it ideal for industrial, commercial, and health care environment. Yeah, which means you can actually make use of your epoxy flooring in your hospital, so you can virtually use it anywhere where you've done your construction, because it is very good, it is strong, stand it is high resistance to heat and all that. Then let's look at the next point: seamless and hygienic surface. So it has a very smooth seamless surface, which also is very very hygienic. So epoxy creates a seamless surface with no grouts, no line, then preventing dirt, bacterial growth, and making cleaning fast and effective, also effortless. So seamless and hygienic in the sense that it's very very easy for you to clean. There is no grouting, just the way I've explained previously. When you have two towels meeting, you have a grout there, you have to start filling the grout, water entry into the grout that is not properly filled, then generating molds, which tends to make the tiles to swell up and all of that. So here it is a different case. It is seamless, the surface is smooth, so there's no grouting in between the surfaces, and it is also very 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 hygienic. So I even feel it is important to even start making use of epoxy flooring the more. Then time and cost effective. So it is faster to install, then has low maintenance and a long service life, reduces repair cost and overall life cycle expenses. You unlike your tile that you over a period of time you start noticing some drastic change on your tiles that has been laid. Then you start noticing areas for renovation, you understand, or grout filling, or some of the skirting on the wall are falling out. But for your epoxy floor, it is very very time and cost effective. You have lesser maintenance, right? And it is also faster for you to install. Then it has a very long service life, you understand, as compared to your normal tile. Then the next point is aesthetics and customizable. So it is very very customizable, has good aesthetic design, look appealing to the eye. So available in various colors, finishes, and design to enhance the look and value of any space. So it actually enhances the look and the value of a place, right? Especially if you use it in a shopping mall, the whole shopping area will look very attractive and beautiful. So look at areas of application and uses. So where do we use epoxy flooring? So the first area is industrial facilities and manufacturing plants. Yes, so because industrial facilities requires a very large space, right? And the manufacturing plants too. So these are areas that has a very large surface area of work. So you can actually apply your epoxy flooring here. You understand? Since there is no grout, there is no skirting, everything will just go seamlessly. Then warehouses and distribution centers. So for your warehouses, distribution centers, epoxy flooring can also be used. Hospital, laboratories, and clean rooms, you can still make use of your epoxy flooring. Then retail stores, showrooms, and more. So these are areas where epoxy flooring are actually applied and used. Commercial offices and lobbies, you can still make use of your epoxy flooring. Then garage, parking area, and basement. Yeah, even for your basement, since it is water resistant, you can still make use of your epoxy flooring. Then food and beverages processing plant, for all different kind of plants, your processing plant, and so on and so forth, you tend to make use of your epoxy flooring. So we'll take a look at a typical epoxy flooring system. That is the layer structure, how the whole layer is structured. So we have the top coat, which is the sealer, right, which provides UV resistance, gloss and protect against wear and chemicals. Then we have the decorative and flake, which is optional, right, which enhances aesthetics and add slip resistance. Yeah, this actually helps to add slip resistance. Then we have the epoxy coat, right, which is the main epoxy layer that often that offers strength, durability, and chemical resistance, right. Then we now have primer coat, so which ensures strong adhesion between the substrate and the epoxy system. Then we now have the prepared substrate, which which is the concrete surface must be clean, dry, and properly prepared. So I think for this prepared substrate is the concrete surface, which you must actually clean, dry, and set for the primer coat, the epoxy coat, the decorative flake, and the top coat to come on. This is the key reasons, the application and uses, then the importance of epoxy flooring in construction. Because many people will be like, what is this epoxy flooring? I've been hearing of it. I don't know what it is. I don't know the function. You understand? I don't even know how method of application, areas of application. So this video has actually stated all these realities.